Sorry, Professor, for a 1 day late of the recap video, but I've been very sick. Um, have an ear infection, and my blood pressure has been going up and up, and I haven't been steady minded, I should say. But anyway, I did my best on the recap video, even though I'm 1 day late. Um, Civil liberty. Liberties are individual rights protected by law from unjust governmental or other interference. The chapter talks about liberty in the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, especially the First Amendment. Freedom of religion. Anybody in the U.S. has the right to practice any faith they believe. The government follows the law of the separation between church and state, meaning government can't make laws that could aid a church or all types of religion. Neither can they have the power to force or delegate religious belief on the people. Such come to the case in New York Engel versus Vitali. Children in the schools were to recite a prayer in the morning before classes were to start. Some parents disagreed to this and brought the issue to the court. Initially, the people lost, but they got an appeal and went against the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court favored them because it was found to be unconstitutional. In another case, when it came to the teachings of evolution, it comes down to saying religious the sex to find it wrong because man did not evolve but were made the same as we are now. Another issue was certain school districts bringing up the subject of intelligent design, i.e., God. In 2005, the issue was brought up to the federal courts and stated it was unconstitutional. Religion symbols in public property, like let's say the mother, baby Jesus, Mother Mary, and Joseph, they can't be displayed publicly unless there's Christmas trees and reindeers and Santa Claus and elves around it as well. So it's not only pertaining to one religion, it's just meaning Christmas in general. Freedom of expression. Anyone has the right to express themselves as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. Examples are cross burning and flag burning. When advertising, the person advertising shouldn't discriminate to a certain group or targeted person. You only see this done is when a certain political campaign is taking place, bad-mouthing opposition to rule in favor towards them. In England, this is 100% illegal, but we're the United States. Expression should be free from danger. Other restrictions from expression are such as pornography. No person 17 and under is allowed to be viewed nude. Freedom of the press. At the time of the early years of the Constitution, it was related to speech written in printed text. Now, as technology evolves, the rules still apply to that form of the press. They are allowed to express what they want, but then again, certain limitations must be followed. Defamation in the public, such as illegal graffiti written on signs, pictures, or any other form of communication, is not allowed. But if writing a defamation note at the party has been seen in private, this is not illegal. Privacy rights, this is not stated anywhere in the Constitution, but is implied in the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendment. Although it is never stated, it is not denied to the people. Roe versus Wade, legalizing abortion. Abortion was legal in Texas at the time, but only if the mother was in danger. Roe was not in danger. She won the case, though. It is the woman's right to do with her body. Privacy rights on the right to die. In 1979, a young woman named Karen Kinlan, who has been in a coma for a year and is living on a respirator. The parents of the woman wanted to end her suffering. So the federal court allowed the family as long as there was proof, clear and convincing evidence. Another privacy issue was held on the grounds of a vegetative person named Schiavo. Um, she was vegetative and she wanted to die. The courts denied them on grounds that the husband has the rights, not the parents, but was later turned over by the governor of the time, which I believe was Jeb Bush in Florida. The lady Schiavo died shortly after. Physician assisted suicide, privacy rights due to terminally ill patients only states that the right to follow this as stated by the Supreme Court. Only states had the right to follow through this, which the Supreme Court gave them power to do so. That's what I meant. Civil liberties versus security issues. Ever since 9/11 happened, it is harder to practice the right of privacy, especially now that law enforcement can secretly search a suspect's home and personal belongings at any time. This comes under the USA Patriot Act. Roving wiretaps is another civil issue, but I believe it is necessary for the safety of all of us. Microsoft and Apple were under fire because the government were asking for access to surveillance. Apple refused because it would undermine the privacy of all iPhone users. Eventually, the FBI found a way to access the phone without Apple's help. In April of 2016, Microsoft sued the Justice Department for the gag orders it was getting violating the First and Fourth Amendment. The only reason why that the FBI started doing this is because one terrorist killed about 14 people, I believe, and about 20 others injured. And the iPhone was the one that had all the evidence leaking towards the association that he was with. Civil liberties of immigrants. As immigrants, we have limited civil liberties, which is truly being enforced because of 9/11. But we still have the rights in this. We still have rights in this country. Due process is now limited. Illegals who are or feel that are a threat to this nation will be deported without due process. Limits the rights of deportees, freedom of association. If immigrants have a certain affiliation with a group that has committed a crime in their home country, they can too be deported although they didn't do anything wrong. Ex post facto are limited too. This law does not apply to deportees because if a law was instated after the felony charge, it would not hold for immigrants. They will still be deported. The Great Balancing Act, the rights of the accused versus the rights to society. Society feels that there are too many rights given to the accused, but they do have rights as well. The rights of the accused are limits on the conduct of police powers and prosecutors, as stated in the book. They have no reasonable or unwarranted searches or seizures, no arrested except on probable cause, no coerced confessions or illegal interrogation, no entrapment. On questioning following on an arrest, the suspect must be informed of his or her rights. Defendants' pretrial rights, writ of habeas corpus, prompt arraignment, legal counsel, reasonable bail, to be informed of charges, to remain silent. Trial rights, speedy and public trial before a jury, impartial jury selected from a cross-section of the community, trial atmosphere free of prejudice, fear of outside interference, no compulsory self-incrimination, adequate counsel, no cruel and unusual punishment, appeal of convictions, no double jeopardy. I like that term, double jeopardy. extending the rights of the accused. If you don't have an attorney that you can't afford, the Supreme Court said that you provide one for free. Uh, the Miranda rights, Miranda versus Arizona. At the time in 1966, Miranda was arrested and confessed to his lawyer, appealing. Miranda was arrested for kidnapping and rape. After his interrogation, Miranda confessed to his lawyer appealed to the court, saying police never informed him his rights of silence and rights to be appointed to the lawyer. The courts agreed to his appeal, and now all law enforcement has to say the statement that we know as the Miranda rights. Exclusionary rule. Improperly obtained evidence will not be used in court. Exclusionary rule and technology. Courts unanimously found police officers seizing devices and cell phones that have vast amount of data. This is posed to be unconstitutional. The death penalty. This has been debated for many years. The people opposed by it believes that it is not a deterrent in committing crimes. The method of lethal injection is said to be cruel and unusual punishment. But if you look at other countries, this is much more humane than what you might think. Some other countries still do firing squad. Man, that sucks. Now we move on to the Civil Rights Act. Civil rights, meaning it is an enforceable right or privilege, which, if interfered by another, gives rise to an action for injury. Discrimination occurs when the rights of an individual are denied or interfered with because of the individual's membership in a particular class or group. After the Civil War, America went through an era of Reconstruction. Later, Reconstruction fizzled out and Jim Crow laws took effect. Plessy versus Ferguson was one such case where Plessy was kicked off the train in Louisiana because he was not considered white, although he said he was 1/8 black and 7/8 white. The law separate but equal was born. Later, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka overturned the Plessy case by desegregating black students not being taught in white schools, allowing it to chip away at racial social structure. It helped to stimulate the Civil Rights Act, which banned segregation in all public facilities, and the Voting Rights Act, which outlawed racially discriminatory voting restrictions. Affirmative action was a good and bad thing for America. The good was it promoted jobs and education to the disadvantaged groups of America, and was also bad because it brought reverse discrimination, meaning the program discriminated against those who did not have minority status, so the government put additional limits on affirmative action. Latinos and Native Americans are other racial groups that were discriminated against. Native Americans, in particular, suffered from high rates of poverty. The Europeans brought over the old world diseases such as smallpox, which the Indians had no immunity. By one estimate, 90% of the New World died. Oh my God. Indians in the 19th century lost more and more territory to the ever-expanding European settlements. In the 20th century, in order for Native Americans to develop their economy, they built casinos. Reservations are not subject to full authority of the state. Asian Americans. The Chinese Exclusion Act. I did not know this until I read the book, but it is not very nice. Chinese Exclusion Act, in an act in 1882, made all Chinese were banned from entering the U.S. and for the Chinese people who already were here were not permitted citizenship. The act was not repealed until 1943. Japanese in America. Japan was banned in 1924. I knew this part. Japan was banned in 1924. Some Japan Americans established businesses or becoming truck farmers. Almost all of these businesses were lost after 1942. The Japanese were in internment camps. Executive Order 9066 by FDR Roosevelt. 62% of them were Japanese Americans. Now, the bad part about this was Japan was in World War II. Yes, they did bomb Pearl Harbor, but the one that started the war were the Germans. And I was wondering, why did FDR only segregate the Japanese but not the the Germans that lived in America? It's not right. Even just thinking just this group and the German group, the German group either is not right, but just one sect of race of Japanese, they weren't white. Japanese were not allowed to leave until 1945, near the end of World War II. Asian Americans in college and college admissions. For the elite colleges, they wanted Asians to outperform whites on the SAT by 140 points. SAT by 140 points. Total score highest in SAT is 1600. I think that's changed now. Top schools deny quotas. Still, these schools still limit the number of Asians in their student body. Lingering social and economic disparities. According to the census data, the social and economic disparities between U.S. and ethnic groups persist. White adults were more likely to have college degrees than black Hispanic adults, including owning homes. Women struggle with equal rights as well. Like African Americans, other minorities, women have had to struggle for equality, mainly the right to vote, forming the Women's Suffrage Association, finally getting the right to vote in 1920. In 1923, women proposed the change to the amendment but was not ratified, and still ongoing process. Women dealt with more issues such as domestic violence, abortion, a women's movement which they were united behind, the freedom of choice, and pornography. This tended to divide the movement. Majority found it to be demeaning to women. Many were also strong believers in free speech. Challenging gender discrimination in the courts. Women began campaigns to establish national and state laws that would guarantee equal rights of women. They challenged statutes like gender discrimination, violated the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. Gender equality on campus. Women sought after to guarantee equality in schools by passing Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Women in the military. One of the most controversial issues involving women in the military. Women in the military service. Only, it's been the role of women in the armed forces. Currently, no draft exists for women in the military service, only for men. It is mandatory. In 2013, women can now compete for assignment to combat units. These units are usually a requirement for promotion. Women in politics today. Many women are in politics. Examples: Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives; Ruth Bader Ginsburg, federal judge appointed by Bill Clinton; Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, federal judge appointed by Obama. Gender-based discrimination in the workplace. Traditional cultural beliefs concerning the proper role of women in society continue to be evident not only in politics but the workforce too. Women have gained protection of discrimination through laws that require equal employment opportunities and equal pay. As far as pay is concerned, women earn 21 cents less than men, averaging $436 less a year. It does add up. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits gender discrimination in employment and has been used to strike down employment policies that discriminate employees on the basis of gender. 1978 Congress amended Title VII to expand the definition to include discrimination based on pregnancy. Sexual harassment is another issue women faced in the workplace. Faced in the workplace. The Supreme Court prohibits this action. One form of this is in order to get raises or job promotions, sexual favors are at play. This too does apply to men, but most victims are women. The rights and status of gays and lesbians. This is another group of people who have been targeted because man loving man and woman loving woman is viewed to be wrong in the minds of many Americans, especially the old school Americans. Lawrence v. Texas. Mostly southern states resisted the movement to abolish sodomy laws, which gave a boost in the 1986 Supreme Court's decision in Bowers versus Hardwick. This in turn made gays allowing to do whatever they wanted to do in the privacy of their own home. In the state laws today, 33 states protect the legal rights of the LGBT community, although 20 still discriminate this community. In the workplace, housing, and public accommodations. Don't ask, don't tell. Bill Clinton brought this up during his campaign. The serving men and women should not be asked or should not tell their sexual orientation because the military viewed it negatively. Even though this passed, many gays were still dropped from military service. Finally, in 2010, during Barack Obama's campaign, this rule was dropped because it served to be unconstitutional, but now allowing them to express openly and serve the U.S. without consequence. Same-sex marriage in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled in favor. The recognition of equal rights regardless of sexual orientation, although in previous years many states outlawed this act of same-sex marriage, but some other states that did allow the civil union to happen still did not allow them to have privileges and rights that normal traditional married couples had. Another group of LGBT community was the transgender. Now, not happy as what they were born as, they could change their birth certificates after going through the reassignment surgery. And when it came to military, Trump was afraid the military would have to pay for the surgery. I don't think that ever happened. The rights and status of juveniles. Voting rights in certain states used to be 21, but was changed to 18 because of the argument behind was if they fought for our country at 18, they too had the right to vote. Juveniles in the court system are defined by state laws, so it depends on the majority. But most crimes that children make tend to fall on the parents. In civil proceedings, usually for the child's best interest, but sometimes if the parents' rights that overpower the best interests. Criminal rights for juveniles. They fall under the common law, although it varies from state to state. The age that usually falls from are usually 7 to 14. Certain states simply set a minimum age for criminal responsibility. Juvenile court system. All states have it in place. Instead of punishment, reform is happening for the child. Juveniles do not have the right to trial by jury or post bail. Felony cases. Children who commit penalties such as murder, manslaughter, armed robbery have a good chance of being tried as an adult, therefore getting adult punishments except for the death penalty because um, it's like a cruel and unusual punishment because they're not over the age of 18. Now let's talk about Congress. Congress is believed to be the bulk of the power of the government. It has a bicameral system, meaning to have two separated houses, House of Representatives and the House of Senate. The powers of Congress. The Constitution is both highly specific and extremely vague about the powers that Congress may exercise. The first 17 clauses of Article 1, Section 8 specify most of the enumerated powers of Congress. That is, powers expressly given to that body. These powers are impose a variety of taxes, including tariffs on imports, borrow funds, regulate interstate commerce and international trade, establish procedures for naturalizing citizens, make laws regulating bankruptcies, coin and print currency and regulate its value, establish standards of weights and measures, punish counterfeiters, establish post offices and post roads, regulate copyrights and patents, establish the federal court system, punish illegal acts on the high seas, declare war, raise and regulate an army and the navy, call up and regulate the state militias to enforce laws to suppress insurrections and repel invasions, govern the District of Columbia. House of Representatives and the Senate. Both are to be elected by the people, but before the Senate was elected by the elite, but now the rules have changed. No, they can now be elected by the people. Congress are the ones to create laws. The laws and rules start off in the House of Representatives. Other responsibilities of the HOR is the power to impeach. Like I myself thought impeachment was removal from office, but it's not. It's just, it's the crimes against the president. Tax and revenue, and they also can do tax and revenue. Has the power to try. The Senate has the power to try impeachment, meaning that once they've been said as guilty, then they can now be removed from office. So it has to go through Senate first. We saw this through the impeachment process of Donald Trump, how he was impeached in the House of Representatives, but when it was in the Senate, they voted for him instead of against him. So he was not kicked out of office. Senate also ratifies treaties, which they have power over foreign policy and confirmation of presidential appointments. House of Representatives, or HOR I'll just call them, is comprised of 435 members, while the Senate has only 100. The Senate has the power of filibuster, which is a tactic in delaying block bills or nominations. A way to bypass filibuster is called reconciliation, a special rule that can be applied to budget bills sent from the House of Representatives to the Senate. Reconciliation measures cannot be filibustered. The nuclear option. It takes 60 senators to invoke cloture. Senate rules can be easily changed with a majority vote. The change in voting rules, basically the nuclear option. Gerrymandering is a common practice we have in Congress. It's not right, but it happens. Meaning it manipulates the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party. This problem has not yet been resolved. Budget resolution and crisis is due each May. It sets overall revenue goals and spending targets. In actuality, Congress has only finished the budget on time only in 3 years, since 1977. The budget is broken up into a series of appropriations bills. If Congress has not passed one of these bills by October 1st, it normally passes a continuing resolution, which is a temporary funding law. A failure to pass the bills, the government goes into a temporary shutdown, leaving only vital services of the federal government open. Now let's talk about the president. Who can become the president? You have to be born on American soil. It doesn't count me, but my son can. 35 years of age. I'm not 35 yet, and my son is not either. 14 years minimum of residency in America. The youngest president was John F. Kennedy, and the oldest president is the current Donald Trump. At the age of 70, he was elected president. The one before that was Ronald Reagan. He was 69 years old. The youngest president. A president can only run for 2 terms. Each term is worth 4 years. The president is head of state or head of government. He is the chief executive, head of the executive branch. He has the power to appoint and remove government officials. The president has the power to grant reprieves, meaning to stop executions. He has the power to give pardons. He is the commander-in-chief. He has the power over the National Guard and enact the War Powers Resolution, which was a law passed in 1973 spelling out conditions under which the president can commit troops without congressional approval. The president is the chief of diplomat when dealing with foreign government, making treaties and effecting executive agreements. Although the president has all these powers, he also has a cabinet which he turns to for counsel. The president has executive privilege, which are limits to the executive privilege. But there are limits to the executive privilege. The president also has executive privilege, which he can withhold information in the public's interest. But there are also limits to executive privilege. One example was that of Nixon. He had to resign from office before he was removed because of his offenses of tapping into the other party's information during trying to run for presidency. Now let's talk about the vice president. How can a person become vice president? Basically, it's all the same things as trying to become president. You need to be born on American soil. You need to be 35 years of age, and you need to have 14 minimum years of residency in America. His job is to support the president. Some presidents chose vice presidents as their running mates because it would enhance their political campaign. If the president fails to do their work because of removal of office or incapacitated or even death, the vice president will take over. Now if the prime vice president can't take over, there are a set of jobs. Other job people can take over the job. Like it says in the book, pull it up. Here we go. Vice president's first in line. Then it's the Speaker, House of Representatives. If not, then the Senate pro tempore. If not, Secretary of State, then the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, this has never happened in the United States, ever getting down to the Secretary of Homeland Security. I have not seen it happen, but definitely for Vice President, like when Richard Nixon left and another Then his vice president came over and took over office. And I think three other presidents that died in office, their vice presidents took over as well. I might be wrong, but that's what I know. Anyway, Professor, that's all I have for the video. I'm sorry that I'm late again. I haven't been well, and after this 2-week ban is done, I hope to see you in class. Have a good day.